like it was from Return of the Jedi, and all the little quinces had eaten it. What was that strip?
No, it's one of those weird situations where, probably about 12 years ago now, for April Fool's Day, the various newspaper cartoonists came up with this idea to do a comic switcheroo. And so we all secretly behind the scenes communicated with each other and exchanged strips for the day. So if you read Blondie that day, it may have been drawn by Scott Adams. And if you read Foxtrot that day, it was drawn by this guy, Guy Gilchrist, who at the time was doing Nancy. And I drew Zippy the Pinhead. And I really liked my Zippy the Pinhead strip. The guy who did the Foxtrot strip, you know, wasn't particularly funny. The dilemma came when I was trying to put the strips in the book, because I didn't really have the rights to Zippy the Pinhead, and it also was a different shape and all that. But I didn't feel right sticking in this fake Foxtrot strip that somebody else had drawn, because legally I wasn't even sure I had the rights to that. So I included in that one book, and probably also the treasury book, is a sort of a chomped off corner that sort of says Return of the Jedi or something like that, and a little Quincy tail running off to the side. Because I didn't want to get as many letters from people saying, hey, there's a misprint in your book, there's a blank spot. So I want to acknowledge it's something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you may be able to find those comic switcheroos online, like if you Google search that. I'm sure somebody somewhere.
Do you or even come out with a Foxtrot book based on just your Warcraft comics?
You know, one of the things I'm starting to do is, because I don't do as many strips as I used to, and it's harder to have books come out as often, is exploring theme books. And we just did a math and science book that came out last spring. No, well, it came out about a year ago. Math, science, and Unix underpants. And that was all my math, science, and computer strips. It's possible that I have enough strips to do sort of a gamer theme book. We need to kind of do the count. And I also need to make sure my publisher actually wants to do it. You know, what's really likely is if my friend who's an iPhone programmer gets his act together, I may make stuff like that available as an iPad or an iPhone app. Because that'd be a little easier to, you know, if I only had 60 strips about World of Warcraft, it doesn't make a book, but, you know, maybe I can charge 99 cents. Yeah.
I was just wondering, over the years of been doing this, how many strips you have, and also, is there any significance to why you came up with the title Foxtrot, why you named the family?
I don't know the exact number of strips I've done, but I've done, you know, 20 plus years. And for at least 19 of those years, it was 300 something strips a year. So around 7,000, I would say, which is kind of scary. And the title of the strip, you know, when I was first doing it, you know, living with my parents and mailing these submissions off, before I even mailed it off, I couldn't think of a good title for it. It was like, okay, it's this family. So I also did, this was my second attempt at a comic strip, and I decided I didn't want my friends or family or anybody looking at it until I was ready to show them. Because I didn't want them getting all excited about it, just to nosedive yet again. It was the first time that strip felt kind of lousy. So I worked on it kind of quietly with my door shut, like a mad scientist. And so for a long time I just gave it a code name, CX. And this was back in the 80s, and there were MX missiles and all that, and that's just the missile experiment. So these were comics experiment. And I had a whole logo for it and everything. But anyway, when it came time to mail it off to syndicates, suddenly I realized, yikes, I don't have a title for this thing, because I've been mentally calling it CX all the time. And so I decided I wanted to have an X in the title, so it sounded sort of the same. And so I gave the family the name Fox, partly because it had an X, and also because it's a really short word. And when you're having to letter all these comic strips, the more short words you can use, the better. And then Fox, you know, it's like Fox Tails, Fox Fire, Fox Trot, that's a dance. And I like the idea that the characters are sort of interacting and bumping into each other, sort of like a little And then the biggest dilemma was once I got syndicated, my syndicate wanted it to be Fox Space Trot, and I'd been doing it as one word, little t. We sort of compromised and made it big F, big T. Yeah, so that's it.
Hi, I'm just curious. You've done a lot of compilation books out there, but will you go the way of Dilbert, like the first 20 years all in chronological order, sort of a big Bible-ish collection?
Correct me if I'm wrong, the big Dilbert book doesn't have all of the strips.
Just the first 20 years.
It really does?
Yeah.
He's not picking and choosing?
It's the best of collection.
Yeah,
Is that an actual best of?
Yeah, because the way I tell it to people is the Calvin and Hobbes complete thing was 3 big old volumes, and he only did the strip for 10 years, and within that 10 years he took 2 9-month sabbaticals, so it was like 8.5 years. I've been doing it for 20 plus years. I don't think my readers can afford a 6-volume.
I'd buy it.
So, you know, we'll see how this best of thing works. It's possible down the road that there'll be an electronic version that makes more sense, just because it's cheaper to produce. The challenge with the best of Foxtrot was I've been doing the strip long enough that a lot of the early Sundays were never digitally archived, and so all they have were these CMYK films that they then had to scan and hope that they hadn't degraded too much and line them up. So there were some terrible going on with my publisher. So I wouldn't hold your breath for a complete function. This
I was just wondering, do you actually want to go to iguana? Just
No.
because like, you have to do quirky things like having an iguana ball, and it's like most of the time they can't fit in those and all. Just do, like things like that. So I'm just wondering where you got the idea for.
I just made it all up. Back when I was creating the strip, I came up with these human characters, and then I decided I wanted the family to have a pet. And it's like a dog, I don't know. And I've never had a cat, I'm allergic to cats, so I decided I wouldn't have a cat in the strip. And then, because Jason was such a little geek, I thought it'd be fun to have him have some oddball pet, like a scorpion or a spider or something. And I decided an iguana, largely because when I was a kid, my favorite things to draw were frogs and dinosaurs. And so this was a way for me to basically draw the thing I always liked to draw as a kid, as an adult in my strip. I wish there were more ways to get Quincy in the strip. And the problem is he doesn't talk or anything like that, so he's kind of a prop.
And one other quick thing is just, I mean, pleading ignorance or something, but how you title your panel, the Dead-Tree Dinosaur Cartoonist?
This is a joke, because Dead-Tree refers to paper. And I've been doing this for 22 years. I'm one of the old guard, at least from the webcomics point of view.
Hey, first of all, thank you for coming out here again this year. I missed you last year, and I'm happy to see you again here this year.
I'm psyched they let me come back. I keep waiting for Koo to send me a polite but firm email saying, Bill, thank you. We're going to shift the direction of PAX.
Right. So I'm a cartoonist sometimes. I know I'm curious about your creative process, though I know for me, I just lock myself in a room and try to think of something until inspiration strikes. It's not much fun. The end result is fun, the process is not. I'm curious what you do to solve it.
Yeah, as I look at my job, when I'm grappling with the writing process, trying to come up with an idea, it's absolutely miserable. And there are times when I'm drawing the strip on deadline, and it's absolutely miserable. There's like this 10-second window in between where suddenly, boom, I thought of something really funny and I can't wait to draw it. That's sort of what keeps me going, are those 10 seconds. But in terms of my creative process, I've got a yellow legal pad and drink a bunch of coffee and just sort of sit there and doodle little sketches, think about what's going on in the news. Every now and then I can take something like StarCraft 2 coming out, go, okay, I can work with that.